Volume's off. Okay. So our next topic, and we'll probably spend a good probably 2, 3 weeks on this one, I think, is about developing facilitation skills and seeing what group facilitation is about and what it's not about, and what our goals should be as we enter into the group process. So first, let's give just some simple definitions to what facilitation and a facilitator is. We use facilitation skills to guide and direct key parts of our work or our group. Okay. We're kind of the person that, if you want to think of it, you're kind of the masters of ceremony, the MC for the group, to keep the group moving along in a productive way. So a facilitator is someone who helps the group meet their goals. Okay. So the skills of facilitation is learning how to continually help that group move along. You, as the facilitator, are the person that your primary background goal is for the group to achieve its goals. And when it comes to facilitation, there's about 3 principles that we should think about. The first one is again, the whole purpose of a group is to draw out opinions and ideas about how to solve a problem, how to overcome addiction, how to manage mental health symptoms, whatever it is. And probably the second one is becoming more and more of a big deal. Okay, and I'm going to circle it to focus on it. Is a facilitator should focus on the how and what. So I know that there's a stereotype about counseling and psychotherapy that in order to solve a person's problem, in order to resolve an issue, you need to dig into the why. So you take the group back into their childhood and see what their childhood was like and where the trauma started to begin and all of those kinds of things. And we have found that that's not really a necessary or important component of actually helping people overcome their symptoms. Indeed, what we find is if you focus on the individual in the here and now, how they're experiencing things, what are they doing, what are their symptoms this last week, and you work on those, while the person starts to heal, those trauma memories become less of a trauma to them because they come to understand that their trauma doesn't own them, but is just a part of their human experience. And it's a very small part once you kind of manage those crisis symptoms, okay? And then the third principle of facilitation is never take sides. And I believe I talked about this when we were going through group process. It's making sure that you have that self-awareness, not to pay more attention to one group member than the other. When 2 individuals are conflicting with each other, you help them work through the process, but you yourself don't say, well, Joe is right because this, and this. No, the art of facilitation is making it so they come to those conclusions together. Okay, and that's kind of the art of it. So let's talk a little bit about how do we get these 3 principles into play. And so we're going to start with the encouraging participation. Okay. Check for comfort level. Okay. And I mentioned this before. This starts even before the group begins. This is you going into that group space and creating it so it's comfortable for people to come into, for them to be there in that space and be able to communicate. Okay. So the first part of check for comfort is that before group even is there. Okay. And then the group, as they come in, encouraging them to sit where they'd like to, shaking hands if it's appropriate, all of those kinds of welcoming things that we do. And then it's literally you can check for comfort, meaning how is everyone feeling tonight? Are we ready for the group? And you look for the people who are kind of hesitant or they're trying not to look at anyone else, and you try to bring that balance into the group. Okay. Now, if anybody's been working in this field, you know that you'll have resistant individuals, and sometimes you can't create total comfort in that group process at that moment. And so when we get to we'll get to a section on things like conflict resolution, how to deal with a difficult client, and all of those things to kind of help facilitate those individuals that may be in the group and they're resistant to it. And maybe it's because they just don't want to be there, or maybe they're there because it's part of their probation or parole. And so we will go on in a section where we'll talk about how can we at least try to manage those clients. Okay. Allow all ideas to be heard. And this again is a skill of not letting just one individual dominate the group, and how do you move through the group so everybody can be heard. Make members feel good about their contributions, and this is just, sometimes it's just simply if they get up and say, "Hey, I had a great week this week. I was really successful." Praising them still for getting up and saying that and thanking them for that is important. When someone brings up something that was very traumatic to them, telling them how much you appreciate them being vulnerable and being able to talk about that difficult situation or that difficult thing they're going through. And the fourth one, so we go into a group and we'll go over it with something called informed consent. And basically, what the informed consent is some basic rules for the group, such as you can't harass, you can't belittle, you know, those kinds of things. And it goes over the confidentiality of a process and based on your state laws. And then it kind of gives some outline of what they should expect in the group itself. Okay. After that is given and they've all went through it and you've went through it, it's always a good idea to say, okay, beyond this informed consent, what other rules or processes do you all want to have? Okay. And you'll be surprised. Some people will say, you know, everyone sits and listens while someone's talking. We only get up in between conversations. I've had rules like that in groups. Sometimes it's they give each other permission to leave or step out of the room. Okay, and it's interesting. A few said no food. It's interesting the different rules that they'll come up with, and it's important to allow them to have that and to own it. Okay, and then the fifth one is to be supportive. Be there for them. We're going to go over empathy. We're going to go over emotional intelligence. We're going to go all over all these different skills that provide all five of these things, but making sure that that supportive element of the group process is there. Now, I'm hoping this is a no duh moment, but why do we need facilitation skills in the first place? Okay. Well, the first part is facilitation is about good planning. Um, Coming up with what you're going to talk about in the group, reviewing your case notes, doing all those things to make sure you're prepared and that you have a goal for the group um, that's appropriate. But it's also having plan B, because some groups you may have that the group just doesn't get to what the goal for that week is, or because they have so many things going on. So what do you do with that, and how do you manage it? The other one is to keep members involved, okay, and keep them active in the group, okay. Leadership opportunities. So some groups will actually, once the professional facilitator runs the group for a couple times, he or she may then rotate around the group and say, okay, John, you're facilitating this week. And so take us through the group. This is commonly used with very structured groups that you check-ins, you talk about a skill, and then you do checkouts and whatnot. It provides this opportunity for someone to feel like they're effective with other people. Okay. Increase skills. And that's our whole job with facilitation skills. Okay. Is we want people to alleviate symptoms, as you would say, but that is done through increasing positive coping skills and skills that help them navigate the difficult situations they're going through. Good communication. A facilitator should be a master of communication, and that means listening and talking. And then, of course, I mentioned this in the previous slide, resolving conflicts and making it kind of modeling that two people can have two different opinions, but that doesn't mean that you can't come to some type of resolution with those conflicts. Okay. So again, what is being a good facilitator includes, it means understanding your goals and your purpose of being there, keeping the group and the agenda moving forward, involving everyone, and decisions should always be made democratically with the majority of individuals. So this kind of is what we've been talking about up to this point, just summarized in these 4 blocks. So let's begin by talking about the planning part. Okay. And this is pre-group. Again, this is the planning part. Is what is the climate? What is the environment? Okay, these often are used interchangeably, but when you're thinking about climate, you're thinking about its emotional uphill. When you're thinking about environment, you're thinking about the visual uphill. You're thinking about, is this a safe place? Is this even a clean place? Is there reduced distractions around the room, or are there posters and all kinds of stuff hanging around which isn't conducive to a good communicative situation? And then you're thinking about the logistics. Okay, I have these guys, girls, and participants for 90 minutes. During break, probably should have some coffee available. Restrooms, all that kind of stuff are taken care of. And then room arrangement. And again, this depends on your skills. I always liked making it so that the group members set up the room, at least for the first couple times. So I'll have them come in and say, okay, why don't we get some chairs and create a circle? And I have them work together and arrange it so that it's comfortable for them. Okay. And so those are kind of the planning processes that you want to think about every time you're going to do a group. And then we talked about the informed consent, and these are some very common ground rules. that are often in the informed consent, and you go over with the group members. And so you say, rule one, ground rule one person speaks at a time. We don't interrupt. Raise your hand is often used, at least in the first 3 or 4 groups. Listen to others, no mocking or attacking, be on time, and respect each other. And you kind of go through these. And I will tell you, dependent upon the functioning of your group, okay? So if you're working with quote unquote a low functioning group, meaning that maybe you're working with unemployed or homeless individuals who have all kinds of other things going on in their life and the stresses that are associated with that, you'll want to provide maybe examples of each of these. So what does it mean not to mock someone or attack someone? This is also, and I'm not saying they're low functioning, please don't get me wrong on this end. You also want to, when you're laying ground rules in, say, an adolescent group, you want to provide very clear examples, especially when working with children and adolescents. So what's an example of mocking, and then what's an example of making sure you don't do that? So putting in that one when you're getting ready to kind of laugh at someone, what skill can you do to make it so that you don't end up mocking? And sometimes these make great conversations too. So you go through, this is what mocking and attacking someone in group looks like. Let's talk about how, if we get to that point, how can we prevent it? What do you guys think we should do when we start feeling that need to laugh at someone or get angry with someone? What skills do you think we can use? And then facilitate that conversation. Once you're done with this, it's then going on and saying, what is there any additional ground rules that you would all like? And as I said earlier, some groups go, those are good. Some groups come up with another list of 10 more things. But the important part is that you make sure it is democratic. And so if there's just one person who is annoyed by gum chewing or something like that, well, that might not go on the rules list, but you might ask the group to be respectful if you're sitting by that individual. Okay. Now let's talk about the meeting process. So this is a basic outline of what a group kind of looks like. Okay. First, start on time. Welcome and thank everyone for coming. Make any introductions, especially I usually have them do kind of some good introductions the first 2 times, and then if there's new group members, we do introductions again. Review your agenda and say, okay, this is what we're working on today. This is what our goals are. And again, in the first couple groups, you want to remind them of those ground rules. Okay. And then encourage participation. In this one, I like to do things called thinking check-ins. It's just basically you go around the room and you have everyone say, sometimes you say, so our goal for this week was to abstain from drinking. Let's just use that one. Let's go around and how did everyone do? And again, the first couple times you kind of have to be directive, saying, hey, let's start with Joe and go counterclockwise and have them, and that encourages them to participate, but it also encourages them to speak up and get comfortable with that group, going back to comfort. Stick to the agenda, and again, this is where some artfulness needs to come in. You want to try to stick to an agenda, but if you need to take a byway, as you would say, or the group is just the majority of the group is having some other issues that need to be addressed, then it's a good idea to kind of leave that agenda and go with it. Probably an example of this is when I was working in the prison, and I was doing some group work there. They had what's called a writer program. And this is where they would put usually young girls, 18 to about 23, into in a 6 month program. And usually these young ladies did something pretty serious, but the judge says, "Well, I'm going to give you the experience of prison, and then if you're successful with it, we'll withdraw the charges." Is basically the deal. But during that time, they have to go through program and groups and all that kind of stuff while they're doing it. A lot of them had a GED requirement and those kinds of things. But when I started the groups, the first thing, uh, once the group members started to get comfortable, they started expressing things that indicated that they weren't even at the point of being able to process what was going on in the group. For example, some of the young ladies had never used a sanitary napkin, had no idea how to control their monthly, oh my goodness, monthly cycle. And so literally, I'd have to spend a group going through some of the basic things of how to care for yourself. Sometimes it was shoes and socks and stuff like that, that simply they just never had someone in their life that ever taught them what they should do when these things in life come up. And this is what I'm meaning by you want to stick to an agenda, but if you recognize that your members aren't even at the level, they're more concerned with life as it is and getting in trouble because they're having their cycle and stuff is getting everywhere and whatnot. Um, that's when you got to leave your agenda aside, back up, and try and get them to that level. Um, but once you are there, and it becomes easier, remember the phases: norming, storming. Okay, we're getting into the storming. In that phase, it kind of gets a little bit easier to stick to an agenda. Okay, and then seek commitments. So this is when you go through a lesson or something, and you ask your group members, for this week, can we commit to this? And you go around and ask, is that okay? And then bring closure to each item, excuse me, summarize results and follow up. And we'll go over this skill in this section. There's two types of summarizing. One is for check for listening. So this is when you simply are asking someone, they tell you a story. Let's use that example. They tell you a story, and you then kind of reflect or mirror back to them. And the best way to do this is, so this is what I heard you say, and then you repeat what you heard them say. I'm giving you complete permission to correct anything I get wrong. Okay, please correct me because I want to make sure we're on the same page or whatever, and tell the story and then wait to see if there's corrections. You do that quite a bit throughout the group, especially when individuals are trying to express something that needs to be heard. Okay. And then there is something called summarizing. This is at the end of the group where you take the majority of the important things that were said by the participants as a group, and you summarize what was said and what was talked about during this group. This is where if you have waitressing skills, you'll do really well at. For us who don't have very good memories, this is where you might want to keep a little notepad in here and keep a kind of checklist of things as you go through the group. But this is really your opportunity to tell the entire group, this is what I heard this group, and this is what we went over. Okay. And then thank the participants and then close the meeting. And for some groups, closing meetings and stuff might be something ceremonial. In other groups, it might be have a good week and take care. It really depends on the type of group that you're facilitating. Usually, again, with adolescents and stuff, you do some type of closing activity that kind of brings closure for them of some type. Okay. So we'll be talking about this throughout these series of lectures about how to prevent disruptions, working with difficult clients, and this is the kind of the starting ground um, for facilitation skills, and these are all facilitator skills, and that it's what you should walk into the room with. Okay, so the first one is get agreement early that we don't disrupt other people when they're talking. It goes back to that whole no harassment, those kinds of things. Listen and show respect. And this is a skill that is done on your end. Okay. Is you're modeling listening to someone and being respectful for what they say. Okay. I think number two is just listen, and three is show respect. Okay. And four, learn expectations. So what should we expect for next week, and to model those skills? But probably the one that if you have a kind of a temper, as you would say, or you're quickly emotionally reactive, the one that you want to work on is staying cool. Um, I've seen master facilitators and counselors do this amazingly when a group member gets angry and frustrating. And one time I watched one of the group members was yelling so bad he was spitting on the facilitator, and the facilitator just sat there and just let him calm down. He didn't get mad, he didn't get angry. He just sat there and allowed the individual to vent, is I get maybe what you would say. But he also masterfully made sure that the environment was safe for everyone else. So he made sure that the person who was angry stayed focused on him. And so if the person who was angry would start pointing at some other group member, the facilitator would grab their eyes and bring their eyes back to, not literally, but with a gaze, come back here, you're talking to me, and brings it so that the risk to the other group members is greatly reduced. And so this is definitely a skill. I've seen a lot of facilitators do really well with it and good with it, but I have known some facilitators who had to use other techniques like a co-facilitator or something to manage that, because we are human beings, we're reactive, and so we got to be aware of that when we're going to the group situation. And one intervention for disruptors, okay, is we want to, uh, these are the things that we want to, excuse me, these are preventative techniques, okay? That's the word I was looking for. How do we make sure that the group setting is one that will intervene on the possibility of disruptions or disruptors, okay? One is controlling individual domination, so making sure that everybody is able to express. And there will always be a few group members who want to dominate the conversation and dominate the group. Sometimes it works best to recruit them in a sense and have them help with the facilitation process. Other times it's just saying, okay, it, oh, excuse me, having like a timer I've had to do that with a few groups that there was just a few that just wanted to dominate the whole hour. So we agreed on having a timer when we're going through our check-ins and stuff. Look for intimidation and tension. Um, um, Listen for individuals expressing doubt. Watch out for side conversations. Okay. Um, Even within a group setting, when we're in a group with people who have similar problems we have, the same diagnoses we have, those kinds of things, the development of cliques is not uncommon. It's not uncommon for two or three of the group members to become really close and and uh, um, um, as you can imagine, if you go kind of back to your high school years, that created a lot of tension between other people in the classroom or other people in a group. So being mindful of things like side conversations and doing little interruptions on them. So if Joe and Bill are talking while the group is going, it's kind of going, hey, Joe, Bill, do you have something to tell the group? I noticed that you guys are talking about something. Can you kind of enlighten us all or doing things like that? If these fell, last resort, is doing direct intervening. Sometimes, and I've had to do this a few times, stopping the group right there, stopping the conversation, and saying, okay, I'm going to take Joe and Bill. We're going to go in the hallway. Why doesn't everybody take a break, use the restroom, get some coffee, whatever, and doing that direct hard intervention. Okay. Now, why this should be the last resort is that is disrupting the group process, and you want to minimize disruptions to the group process because when you come back as group members, you might have other group members that are now apprehensive about the group process. They may feel fearful of talking or saying something that's going to disrupt the group again. So when I say the option of last resort is to stop the group right there and whatnot, uh, uh, make sure that's the last resort. Um, okay. Again, let me look here. Oh, dude. All right, I think I'm going to save this because there's an activity that we want to do with this emotional intelligence. So I think I'm going to leave this for next class. And then we'll have an activity between Tuesday and Thursday dealing with this. But I hate to do it over the weekend, especially I'm hoping that um, many of us have the 3-day weekend with President's Day. But let me think about this. Yeah, I think so. What we're going to talk about next Tuesday, and I'll stop sharing right now, is something called emotional intelligence. And um, when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're not talking about just being empathetic. Um, we're not just talking about listening and whatnot. What we're talking about is a self-awareness of your own emotional state when you walk into a room. And also your awareness of the emotional tones within the room. Being aware of how everyone is feeling and then giving a proper response, not based upon your emotional state and not necessarily based on the room's emotional state, but what is going to elevate that room to be a conducive space for everyone to be in. And yes, I will say emotional intelligence may sometimes dictate that your emotions and your feelings don't really matter in a given situation. That emotional intelligence is about doing what will produce the best outcome for your group. And so I want to save that because it's more of a 2-day lecture with an activity in between. So that's where we'll head for next week. So for today, we'll cut it a little bit short. And I'll ask, does anybody have any questions for today?
I had a question.
Yes, Brenda.
Um, so I work in the substance abuse treatment field, and lately, just trying to present, I guess one thing that I run into is individuals, uh, I guess, invalidating some Native American treatment approaches. I don't know if you have any insight or thoughts, just, you know, the medicine wheel and trying to utilize some of those just within the Native American substance abuse treatment programming, and some group members invalidating that, or this is not our way, or this is not of the Apache people. So I just wanted to know, if that's something you've come across, or if you had any insight on that.
So, so there's a couple things on that. Um, is sometimes I'll give the school example. There's some things that are Tana Otham that don't necessarily meet with our broader college communities. And again, in these cases like that, it's about, well, what can this have meaning from your perspective? So for example, if you have a medicine wheel type of representation for sobriety or whatever, and they're saying that, well, that's not something that's within my tribe, or saying, it's simply asking, well, how can you give this meaning within the context of your experience? So, and it's trying to get them to realize that this is just a symbol, but you have to make that symbol meaningful to you based on your life and your experience. The other side of it is that, and again, we'll talk about this when we get to identity, is in some contexts, individuals want to reject their heritage, their Native American. We see this a lot with Asian Americans when there's treatment programs that are specific to, for example, that are based on more of a Japanese culture or a Taiwanese culture. And group members go in and say, I don't want anything to do with this because I'm an American now. And again, it's about making sure that the treatment is appropriate for where that individual is. So I don't know if that makes sense, Brenda. Did that help at all?
Oh yeah, it is helpful. I've just, in my experience, just there's been some individuals, very almost philosophical about, oh, this is Lakota, this is not us, this is how we were, this is Western colonization. And for me, I guess because I'm still fairly new to counseling, it has been a challenge to kind of navigate them back into the group setting and not taking over the group or invalidating the concepts that are trying to be presented, but it is helpful.
Mhm. And Brenda, we will go over some skills that I think will help you in your situation. But it is a very difficult thing to navigate when your group process doesn't match the philosophical, sometimes religious beliefs or something about some of the participants. And so it is something that's delicate to navigate. And I completely understand your frustration. It's a frustration that we all will run into, by the way, in this field, where sometimes our treatment doesn't always match what the person is looking for. And so, one, don't blame yourself. This is actually a common thing that happens. I know that's not encouraging, but it is.
No, I appreciate it. I do.
Okay. Any other questions for today? or comments? Jocelyn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So not really a question. It was just kind of something I was thinking of when reading the common techniques. As I'm a visual learner, I thought I'd share in case anybody else can relate. Um, there is a episode of a show called Parks and Recreation, if anybody's heard of it, with Amy Poehler. And the episode is they're trying to figure out what to put in a time capsule. So they have kind of like a group meeting with the town about what should go in it and how to approach it. And as I'm reading these common techniques, I kind of noticed that they kind of touch base on a lot of these techniques in that episode. So if anybody kind of wants to see, what that looks like. Now, granted, it's not, professional in any sense. It's a comedy show. But like I said, I'm a visual learner. So it's kind of nice just to kind of see how some of these techniques could be played out in a group setting. So I thought I would just bring that up in case anybody wanted to check it out to kind of, see how these can be adapted in real life or in a show.
Thank you for that, Jocelyn. Can you remind us, so what is it? It's Park and Rec. Is there a certain episode? Or
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the episode exactly, but I'm sure if you YouTube Parks and Rec and then time capsule, they're trying to figure out what to put in the time capsule to bury for the town. And they have it just goes on and they have all these different uh like spreadsheets because some people want this and so they try to branch off into different categories and then it just kind of gets out of hand and then the conflict resolution at the end is they put the tape of the meeting with everybody's ideas in the time capsule so then that way instead of putting all the stuff they put all the ideas that people would have had for the time capsule in the time capsule so then in the future people can it's a bit silly but it's a great way to kind of see how they start with brainstorming and then they kind of go into discussion and then they kind of do parking lots and round robins and then they do voting so a lot of those techniques are played out in this episode.
oh, excellent. Thank you for that suggestion. Very cool. I'll have to check it out. Any other questions or comments?
Yes. Well, one of the topics that or I guess one thing that I found is somewhat of an issue, as I have been working on my listening skills and not listening to respond, but um, is that like sometimes I get I don't know how to explain it. It's so my sister is currently homeless and she's been struggling with substance abuse for I don't know how long, and we've kind of fell out of touch over the last 10 years or so. Just recently started kind of communicating again. And so some of the things that I've learned, I've kind of helped applied to my relationship with her. Um, yeah, and it's been great until a couple of days ago. She had called me, and I try to answer all of her phone calls when she calls because I'm not sure where her state of mind is. If she's calling to like vent, kind of just talk to me. And I all I do is really listen. But the last conversation that I had with her, um, it was kind of like that, oh, Tash, you don't understand, like you have it good. And I didn't say anything, like I didn't rebuttal back to her or anything, but like after my conversation, I went on a tangent to my husband, like, oh, like she doesn't remember when I was homeless or when I was, living out of my suitcase. And I'm just like, she thinks like it's just all great and dandy, right? Like this is like my life and it's been like this forever. So when those type of situations come up with like clients, how do you turn, I guess, the situation back to what it is supposed to be on? Because I know it's not about me, and it shouldn't be about me, but from her perspective, like she's trying to, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like it's now the topic is now back on me versus what I'm doing with my life rather than what she's feeling or what she's, going through.
Mhm.
So is that something that, we will discuss later down the road as far as how to take those conversations um and be able to revert them back to where they should be?
Yes, Tanisha, we will actually spend a lot of time on that. Well, not a lot, but a good amount of time talking about things like deflection, which is what she's doing. She's deflecting. And she's also doing what's called transference. There's transference and then there's counter transference. Transference is when the client is putting their problems onto the counselor. So she's saying, you don't understand, you don't get it, and she's transferring her frustration onto you. And then the counter transference is when we're not mindful of ourselves. And so we start transferring our problems onto the client and start doing things like trying to defend why we're there for them and whatnot. Okay.
Yeah.
Being aware of that is important because it has other implications like not getting vicariously traumatized, those kinds of things, which we'll talk about. But really, in most of those situations, it's about we're not here to talk about my experience. We're here to talk about your experience and try to find a solution. So my experience in the situation is irrelevant. Okay.
Yeah.
And expressing that to him and bring him back to them, stop that transference process and say, hey, we're not here for me. We're not here for my experience. We're here talking about you. And I need to understand what you're experiencing if I'm going to be able to help or provide anything. My experience is irregardless. It it doesn't mean anything because this is about you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, like you said, realizing that and making sure that you're like how I was like kind of in my head, like this isn't about me and understanding that and not, doing that whole arguing back and forth, trying to defend myself. I did realize that. And,
Mhm.
it wasn't easy, but I mean, it did help me and really listen to her and
Mhm.
be able to kind of just be there for her to hear her. Um, and this was like a good 2 hour phone call. And I was just like, it was, it was a lot, but and then afterwards I was like, maybe not counseling or just being like my sister's, ear isn't the best thing. It's what I kind of came down to. I was like, maybe not doing this for like family things are good, but but it's been fun, I guess, and interesting to be able to kind of put what I'm learning into like real life situations outside of my own work into like my personal life to be able to communicate and build those communication skills with my kids, my husband, my family. Because I think all of that kind of builds the core foundation for relationships and communications with individuals that I, will have day-to-day basis with.
Mhm. And Tashina, you're right. I'm trying to think of what I want to try and say. Is yes, I would encourage you to use these skills in every aspect of your life. I know when I learned them, I became a much better listener with my family and my son and everything else. And implementing these things in your personal life is important. But making sure that you don't overstep the boundary between being a sister and being a therapist
Yeah.
is important because all of you will all of a sudden once you um, and I'm sure some of you already experienced this, is everyone, once they learn that you're a counselor, you do groups, all this, everyone comes to you with their problems. And they want you to have that solution. And it's really, really important to set those boundaries with family. Like for example, I get a lot of questions about my nieces and nephews. And I'll simply say I'm not talking about that. There's professional resources I can give you, but that's a boundary that can't be overlooked. So my recommendation is continue using those skills, be there for your sister, but remember, she's not your responsibility as far as professionally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, gang. And Dana said setting up boundaries with family is so important, especially if you do this work. Yes, exactly. I 100% and do that up front, definitely. And do it from the beginning of your career. I know a lot of individuals who end up being the family therapist because they don't set those boundaries up from the beginning. So, all right, gang, let's go ahead and get out of here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you for sharing, everyone, and have a good weekend, okay?
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.